This is a response to TVP Challenge, aka Brandy's recent blog post about me. She starts off attacking the concept that all exchanges in a free market are mutually beneficial. While she agrees that this is technically true, she argues that it isn't fair, that in many cases people would still be in unacceptable conditions. As I've already stated previously, in the voluntary society that I advocate, there would no doubt be assistance offered to those who are in conditions society deems unacceptable. As society becomes more and more prosperous, the standard of living of even the poorest person within it grows higher and higher. Compare the standard of living of poor people today to poor people 100 years ago, and then tell me that this is not the case. The more unacceptable the conditions are, the more society will pressure the individuals within it to contribute more toward assisting people from getting out of those conditions. And it can do that by increasing the positives of contributing as well as increasing the negatives of not contributing. To argue that a market-based voluntary society would not offer assistance to people in need is to argue that the people in this society would not care about anyone but themselves. If this were the case, then the society would not hold such a high standard toward voluntarism in the first place. The market system that I advocate, due to its emphasis on voluntarism, would not only help to increase the compassion that we feel for each other, but also give us the financial means to express those feelings. If there is one thing that history has shown to stop wars from happening and increase empathy between societies, it is trade. For the next few points, Brandy seems to be talking in a different language than I am. I argue that marginal utility is the only way to figure out what is the most economically efficient to produce. She seems to argue that we should throw away economic efficiency and just look at scientific efficiency. As I've already pointed out, if you want a society that is based on scientific efficiency, then individuals should be given a potato-based diet and assigned a rotating bunk bed for living quarters. If you wish for the people in the society to have more than these basic necessities, then you must switch out of the realm of scientific efficiency and into the realm of economic efficiency, which is reliant upon marginal utility, which is reliant upon prices that are set through the voluntary exchange of property. I am obviously not doing a good job of explaining marginal utility, because it seems that Brandy is not quite understanding the argument. Yes, a resource-based economy would be able to put together a database of available resources. Yes, a resource-based economy would be able to put together a database of all available uses for these resources. But how is this information communicated to the consumer? If this information is not communicated to the consumer, then the things that the consumer wishes to be produced would not take this information into account, and thus these resources would be misused. A price is the method by which the market is able to communicate this scarcity, production, and opportunity cost information to the consumer, so that the consumer actually can be able to take this information into account. The price system is what allows for the intellectual division of labor. That is to say, because of prices, consumers do not have to have a masterful knowledge of all of the resources expended and all of the alternative products that could have been created. Without prices, the consumer must have an all-encompassing knowledge of the trillions and trillions of possible ways for resources to be mixed together, and be fully aware of the butterfly effect that the production of a particular good has on the production of all other goods, in order to even begin to be able to give a true judgment of what they want to be produced. This amount of intimate knowledge of resource expenditure and production processes throughout the entire economy is something that no one single individual can master, let alone in real time as resources and technology constantly change, which is why we must have a method of communicating this information to the consumer through a simple numerical value, otherwise known as a price. In response to my point about scientific efficiency leading to potato diets and bunk beds, Brandy argues that in a resource-based economy, we would use the scientific method to determine the most efficient way to meet people's needs and preferences. This is exactly my point. Even the Venus Project admits that they would not be completely scientifically efficient, that they too would allow for the fulfillment of preferences rather than just basic needs, that they too would be willing to engage in less scientifically efficient production processes in order to fulfill human preferences as well. This is the problem. When you refer to human need, then there are scientifically deductible objectives that can be reached, and thus, with these static goals in mind, you do not need economic efficiency, since you already know what to produce, and it merely becomes a matter of figuring out how to best produce those things in the way that best minimizes the expenditure of resources and energy. The problem comes when you attempt to cater to preferences rather than just needs. Preferences, unlike needs, are not scientifically deductible. In order to best satisfy people's needs, you don't need any feedback, since human needs are generally the same. But in order to best satisfy people's preferences, you need feedback from those people. And in order to get that feedback, those people have to take production and opportunity cost into account. Thus, you need a method of communicating this information to them in an easily digestible format, otherwise known as a price. And prices and marginal utility are symbiotic functions of a market. That is to say, that prices affect the consumer's marginal utility, but the consumer's marginal utility itself has an effect on prices as well. Brandy then acknowledges that I have satisfactorily explained how monopolies and cartels would be far more difficult to form without the help of governments, and that they are simply unsustainable in a free market. But she does take issue with the fact that there would still be a theoretical time window for the monopoly to finally achieve their status and charge artificially high prices before they ultimately come apart. First, we have to note that the practice of seeking a monopoly in a free market would ultimately be a futile one that would inevitably cause you to lose more money than you make. So in a free market, the only people who would attempt to try this monopoly scheme would be individuals who are just too stupid to recognize the money-losing venture they are engaging in, or very wealthy individuals who are knowingly blowing their fortune merely for some sadistic satisfaction of being able to overcharge on a product for a short time. The wealthy statist would have a much easier time simply buying up a large portion of a commodity and then destroying it, thus causing the commodity price to go up. So really the only people who would try this monopoly scheme in a free market would be rich individuals who are too stupid to know better. In which case, this truly would be quite rare indeed, since in order to become rich in a free market in the first place, you need to be smart enough to do some basic arithmetic and logical deduction. And if society wishes, it can easily create a law stating that if enough individuals in society believe you are a monopoly who is engaging in price gouging, then you have instantly forfeited all of your property, which will then be divided up into competing businesses, in which case the time window to engage in price gouging would be quite short indeed. But Brandy takes issue at a much deeper level, arguing that instead of all of these safeguards to protect us from individuals abusing the system, we should merely create a system where there is no longer any incentive for abuse in the first place. To me, this seems to be more of a play on words rather than an argument of any substance, because safeguards in the free market do exactly that. They take away the incentive to abuse the system in the first place. Yes, every now and again people will be able to find ways to cheat, but that does not mean that we should therefore abandon the entire economic system which would cause the highest amount of prosperity for the people within it. To me, it's like saying that if two people were alone in an alley somewhere, then there would be nothing stopping them there would be nothing stopping one from murdering the other, and therefore we should eliminate the existence of cities. Herein lies another point that I think the Venus Project seems to ignore, and that is the fact that there will always be a small minority of psychopaths who, for whatever reason, will not follow the rules. The Venus Project seems to advocate minimizing this factor through nothing more than ensuring that children are raised well, and I don't see how this is legitimately addressing the problem. The Venus Project is naive to think that it's possible to eliminate all incentives for abuse. The belief seems to be that all conflict is caused by scarcity, and that if we merely eliminate scarcity, then we will eliminate conflict. Not only does the economic calculation problem show that a resource-based economy will not end scarcity, but even if we assume that it did, the Venus Project would still not be able to eliminate the scarcity of individual humans, for example, and so there will still be social conflict. And there will still be scarcities of unique man-made creations such as works of art, of which there will still be property conflict. And so if the Venus Project wants to be taken seriously, then it should propose systems of dealing with conflicts, rather than simply going under the assumption that there will not be any. At least the voluntary market society I advocate is realistic enough to acknowledge that there will still be conflicts and propose safeguards to minimize and deal with those conflicts. If we want a society that achieves the highest amount of peace and prosperity, then we should advocate for a voluntary society that allows individuals to voluntarily interact with each other however they wish, not a society that destroys the very economic foundations for prosperity in the first place. But let me again end on a happier note and say that I think it's great that the Venus Project is trying to end the consumptionistic culture we are currently in, and I may very well be completely wrong, and maybe the resource-based economy will figure out a way around the calculation problem, and become the most peaceful and prosperous society in existence. I wish that both of our systems can be given the opportunity to be tried out in the real world, so that we can finally see which system really would work the best.